They say the forest never forgets. I didn't believe it at first. Just another spooky line to add flavor to late-night ghost stories. But I was wrong. It started as all camping trips, dogs. Too much optimism and too little planning. Just me and two friends, Jason and Lucy, heading out to Black Hollow, a forest with a reputation as dark as its name. Even locals whispered about people who'd vanished, strange sounds at night, and a legend of a curse laid down by a witch long ago. We, of course, scoffed. A cursed forest. Perfect for Instagram. The sun was setting as we reached the clearing. Trees loomed like skeletal sentinels, their branches clawing at a sky streaked with bruised purples and reds. We set up camp in the weight of a deep silence that muffled even the wind. Not a bird, not a rustle. Just the quiet of a place that seemed wrong. Jason was the first to break the spell. "Let's get a fire going," he said, trying too hard to sound casual. The flames licked the air, casting eerie shadows that danced like puppets against the trees. That's when Lucy pulled out her phone. "Want to hear something creepy?" she asked, her grin too wide. She played an audio clip, a garbled recording of a woman's voice, soft and breathy. "Leave, while you still can." We laughed, nervously at first, then genuinely. But then the forest laughed back. A sound low and guttural rippled through the trees. It wasn't an animal. It was something other. We froze. Jason turned his flashlight toward the source, but the beam only seemed to make the darkness thicker, like it was swallowing the light. Probably just the wind. Jason muttered, though his voice betrayed him. Lucy rolled her eyes, but I saw her hands trembling as she adjusted her hoodie. Then came the footprints. Heavy. Deliberate, circling us just beyond the firelight. Crunch. Crunch. Something, or some out there. Jason grabbed a stick from the fire, holding it like a torch. "Who's there?" Shouted into the void. No answer. "Maybe we should just pack up and go," Lucy whispered. Jason shook his head. "We're not running because of some prank." He stomped toward the sound, the fiery stick held high like some ancient warrior. That's when we heard it. A giggle. High-pitched, childlike. But wrong, like it was trying too hard to sound human. Loose scramp it. "Whoever's out there, stop messing with us!" The giggle turned into a chorus. Dozens of voices overlapping, whispering, hissing. Jason's torch went out as if snuffed by unseen hands, and then we saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them. Reflective like an animal's. But these weren't deer or raccoons. They blinked in unison, watching us, studying us. Jason stepped back toward the fire. "Stay together," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The eyes moved closer. Shadows slithered between the trees, figures that seemed to shift and dissolve, box like smoke with intent. One stepped into the light, a woman, or what was left of her. Her face was pale, stretched too thin, and her mouth curved into an impossible grin that split her face in two. I said, "Leave." She whispered, her voice a jagged echoed, and Lucy played. Lucy screamed, and Jason swung his stick, but it passed through her like mist. She laughed, her face rippling like a reflection on disturbed water. Right lectured, but my legs stubbed like lead. Jason grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet, and we bolted. The forest closed in around us, trees twisting and leaning as if trying to fear. "Ever?" Jason shouted, pointing to an old cabin, its roof half collapsed under the weight of years. We burst inside, slamming the door behind us. The air was thick with the smell of rut and mildew. "What now?" Lucy sobbed, her face streaked with tears. "Wait for the morning," Jason said, though Wisboy's voice wavered. "The closer this time, seeping through the cracks in the walls." "You can't hide it," the ladder followed, scraping against our nerves like nails on glass. And then the cabin itself seemed to breathe. The walls expanded and contracted, the wood groaning as if alive. The floorboards buckled, and something began crawling up through the gaps, hands skeletal and grasping, pulling themselves free from the earth. We ran again, bursting into the night, only to find the forest completely changed. The trees had shifted, forming a labyrinth of gnarled roots and twisted branches. The ground pulsed beneath our feet, and the air buzzed with an electro that made my teeth ache. Jason tripped, and before I could help him, the shadows swallowed him whole. One moment he was there, screaming my name, and the next. Lucy and I cut nothing, her sobs the only sound besides the pounding of my heart. The laughter was all around us now, overlapping voices that seemed to come inside my head. Finally burst out of the forest, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. But when I turned to Lucy, she was gone. No screams, no struggle, just gone. And the forest hasn't left me. At night, I hear the whispers, the laughter, the sound of footsteps circling my bed. And sometimes, in the shadows of my room, I see those forgets. And it's waiting for me to come back. Our wild camping trip in the Scottish Highlands had been everything we'd imagined: breathtaking landscapes, untamed beauty, and the thrill immersed in nature's raw embrace. Surrounded by towering mountains, shimmering lochs, and endless moors, we had set off with excitement, determined to explore the protection of a tent box, sleeping under the stars and surrendering ourselves to the elements. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and earth, invigorating our senses as we trekked deeper into the highlands box. But soon our excitement gave way to frustration. The trails, which had seemed so straightforward on the map, twisted and turned in ways that defied logics. Every wrong turn seemed to pull us further away from our intended path. The landscape, beautiful but deceptive, began to change at each misstep. What had once felt like an adventure was beginning to feel like an eerie trap. By the time the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, casting long, ominous shadows, we realized we had lost our way. It was then that we stumbled upon the secluded glen. The air in this part of the highlands was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of the underbrush or the far-off call of a bird. The stillness was unnerving, almost unnerving. Fies and I exchanged uneasy glances, each of us feeling the weight of something unseen, something watching us from the shadows. We set up camp in the glen despite the unsettling atmosphere. The stars above were a dazzling sight, briefly distracting us from the tension that seemed to cling to the very air around us. As we lay on our sleeping bags, the silence of deeper, and the silence of the night began to shift. Then, the rustling started again, closer now, almost deliberate. A pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, reflecting the thin darkness stars. At first, we thought it was a deer, its form outlined by the moonlight. But there was something wrong with it. Its gaze was too intense, too deliberate, as if it were aware of our every movement. We stayed perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. The deer's presence, at that moment, was not a graceful animal of the wild, but a spectral figure watching us, judging us, It slowly turned away and disappeared into the dark woods, but the unsettling feeling lingered. We didn't sleep much that night. Continued. Twig snapping, rustling leaves, and each noise seemed to bring us closer to the edge of something otherworldly. I couldn't shake the sensation that we weren't alone, that something or someone, Chatterbox, was out there moving in the shadows, watching. It wasn't just the animals that lived in the highlands, but something else. Morning little relief. The fog had settled over the landscape, turning the hills into ghostly silhouettes. We packed up our gear, trying to shake off the lingering unease, and continued our trek. But every time thought we found our bearings, the weather would turn on us. Dark clouds would roll, and suddenly, the wind picking up and sweeping away our sense of direction. The rugged terrain seemed to mock our every step, and even though we were exhausted, we pressed on, our spirits lifted only by the breathtaking beauty around us. Then, as if the highlands weren't strange enough, we found it. A dilapidated cottage, half swallowed by the wilderness. Its stone walls, cracked and weathered, were covered in thick moss, and its roof sagged under the weight of time. It looked abandoned, forgotten by the world. But there was something about it. Something in the way the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches like skeletal fingers. A narrow, overgrown path led us to the cottage's entrance. The door hung ajar, creaking softly in the wind as if inviting us in. My friends hesitated, but curiosity pushed us forward. We stepped inside, the door groaning as it opened. The air was heavy. He can be a chatterbox, and musty with decay, as though the cottage had been untouched for decades. A sense of oppression hung in the room, thick and suffocating. Dust covered every surface, and the remnants of old furniture, a cracked table, mismatched chairs, lay abandoned in the gloom. But it was the shelves that caught our attention. Jars filled with strange liquids. He can be identifiable objects, and things that shouldn't be there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And then from the corner of the room, something caught my friend Sarah's eye. She gasped, her grumbling. "What is that?" We turned, and my heart nearly stopped. Hanging from the ceiling were twisted, grotesque figures made of animal bones and twigs. He swaying in the draft. The sight made my stomach churn. The figures seemed to move on their own, their airy dance sending chills down my spine. "Let's get out of here," I whispered. The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to palpable dread, and the realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. We were not meant to be here. We backed away, the weight of the place pressing in on us, our instincts screaming to leave. As we hurried down the path, the sense of being watched intensified. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and the air turned colder with each step. By the time we reached the open space beyond the tree, we were gasping for breath, our hearts pounding. Once we were safely away, Sarah spoke, her voice shaking. "Did you see those figures? What the hell was that place?" We had barely answered. What bare thing was clear, we had encountered something that shouldn't have been disturbed. We couldn't explain what we had seen, but we knew that the highlands had secrets. Dark, ancient secrets that were best left undisturbed. As we continued our journey, that cottage lingered in our minds, a reminder of the strange, haunting side of the wild. The unpredictability of the highlands had not just tested our endurance, but our understanding of the world. Nature in its rawest furries deeper, hold we could comprehend. We had entered the wild to find adventure, but instead we found a lesson in respect. Respect for the land, the creatures, and the ancient forces that dwell within it. As we sat by a tranquil loch, the setting sun casting a golden glow on the water, we realized that this wild camping trip wasn't adventure. It was a reminder sometimes. The wild isn't just an escape from the world. It's a confrontation with something much bigger. Something that doesn't need us to survive, but we need it to remind us of our place in it. And as the darkness fell around us, the whispers of the highlands seemed to echo that truth. Our camping trip to Ouachita National Forest was a long-awaited adventure, one that promised the perfect blend of nature, friendship, and the thrill of exploration. Nestled deep within the Ouachita Mountains of Arkansas, this forest is renowned for its breathtaking landscapes, lush trees, and mundane trekkers and campers alike. As we packed our gear and prepared to hit the road, excitement filled the air. The prospect of spending a few days immersed in the beauty of the forest, away from the hustle and bustle of daily life, filled us with anticipation. We envisioned evenings spent around the campfire, sharing ghost stories beneath a starry sky, and days full of hiking and discovering hidden gems within the forest. Upon arrival, the beauty of Ouachita National Forest took our breath away. Towering trees loomed over us like ancient guardians, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze, while the scent of pine filled the air. We chose a secluded area, far from the main trails, to set up camp, eager to embrace the peace and solitude. The first evening was everything we had hoped for. We gathered around roasting marshmallows, sharing those stories. The flickering flames casting a warm glow as darkness slowly crept in. Laughter echoed through the trees, and in that moment we felt invincible, wrapped in the safety of our friendship and the beauty of nature. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the ground, an unsettled feeling began to creep in. The sounds of the forest shifted, and the laughter that had filled the air was replaced by an eerie silence. It was at that moment you decided to take a by trail, hoping to catch the sunset over the mountains. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew heavier and an inexplicable tension settled over us. Before long, we stumbled upon a clearing that sent chills down our spines. In the center stood a group of men, their voices low and conspiratorial, gathered around a makeshift table covered with objects that seemed entirely out of place in the tranquil forest setting. As we crept closer, we realized they were engaged in suspicious activities, what appeared to be the preparation of illegal substances. The sight and our hearts raced as we exchanged wide-eyed glances. The gravity of the situation beginning to sink in, we instinctively knew we had to leave. But the urgency of our escape only heightened as we realized we had unknowingly walked into a dangerous situation. The men were rocked in the danger tense and focused, and we could feel the weight of their presence bearing down on us. We quickly retreated, our hearts pounding in our chests and adrenaline surging through our veins. The laughter and camaraderie we had shared moments before felt like a distant memory, replaced by a primal instinct to survive. As we hurried back down the trail, the forest, once welcoming, now seemed ominous and threatening. Every rustle of leaves, every snap amplified, echoing in our ears. Hating our fear, we moved quickly but quietly, trying to put as much distance between ourselves and the clearing as possible. The urgency of the situation drove us forward, and our breath quickened, our footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. When we finally reached the safety of our campsite, we gathered, our faces pale and shaken. The reality of what we had just witnessed weighed heavily on us, and we struggled to process the fear that gripped us. "What do?" asked, her voice trembling. We all knew the answer: we had to leave. The forest that had promised adventure now felt like a trap, and the thought of encountering was too much to bear. We quickly packed our gear, our actions fueled by the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. The sun had set completely, and dark set enveloped the forest, making our task even more daunting. We moved with purpose, hearts racing as we loaded up the car, the shadows around us seeming loud of danger. The laughter and joy from the previous night were now replaced by a palpable tension, and we couldn't shake the feeling that we're being watched. As we drove away from Ouachita National Forest, the weight of the experience settled in. The beauty of the forest, once a source of excitement and joy, had turned into a haunting reminder of the unexpected dangers that can lie hidden in the wild. We shared our thoughts, each of us grappling with the fear and uncertainty of what we had encountered. The trip had taken a turn we hadn't anticipated, and the thrill of adventure had been overshadowed by the reality of danger. In the aftermath of our escape, we reflected on the importance of being aware of our surroundings and trusting our instincts. The experience taught us a valuable lesson about the unpredictability of nature and the potential risks that come with exploring the unknown. A wooden sword adventure, we had also encountered a stark reminder of the darker side of the wilderness. As we left the forest behind, the memories of our triplet in our minds, a mix of excitement and fear that would shape our future adventures. We vowed to always remain vigilant, to heed the warnings, and to respect the world places we chose to explore. The unexpected encounter with danger had changed us, but it had also strengthened our bond as friends, reminding us that in the face of uncertainty, we could rely on each other to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. I still remember clearly that day when it rained as my group of friends decided to take part in a volunteer trip to recon beacons. It seemed harmless, right? A simple morning. Just a little rain and the cold wind blowing, but what we didn't know was that this trip would turn anything but a normal hike. The moment we stepped into the wilderness, the atmosphere became strangely heavy. The cold wind seemed to cut through to my bones, but no one said anything. Everyone in the group was focused and eager to finish quickly and help those in need. But I couldn't shake off this uneasy feeling that crept into me. A strange silence hung over the forest. Not the kind of silence of nature, but something unnatural. At that moment, a group of armed police officers suddenly appeared on the trail. We stopped, surprised and a little worried. They asked us where we were going and what our purpose was, and looked at us with suspicion. Even though everyone explained our charitable purpose, I could still feel their cold gaze. One of them even raised an eyebrow, as though he knew something we didn't. We moved on after they permitted us, but I couldn't shake off the feeling. Those eyes, that look, it haunted me. We continued our journey, but no one spoke. Everything seemed to become more ominous, not just because of the gloomy sky, but because of these vague, strange feelings that lingered. The deeper we went into the forest, the more I felt like we were being watched. Something moved between the trees, but I couldn't tell what it was. Sometimes, I could hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned around there was nothing, just a feeling. But the further we went, the stronger it became. We lost our way, the trails seemed to vanish. Everything became foggy, as though we were stepping into another realm. We kept walking, holding on to the belief that if we just kept going, we'd eventually reach our destination. But as the darkness began to settle in, I realized I was wrong. The mountain peaks that once seemed familiar now felt alien and frightening. A strange flash of light suddenly appeared in the sky, like a chatterboarding. I looked at everyone, but they, like me, couldn't articulate what was jumbled in our minds. When we reached the summit of a high mountain, we stopped, exhausted and fearful. And then we saw it, a shadowy figure floating in midair. It wasn't a clear shape, but it had this strange, powerful presence, as though it was watching us. A strange noise came from behind, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. Still, I could feel something. Standing there, a chilling sensation enveloped us, as if not only I but the whole group were being watched. At this point, no one dared to speak. Everything around us became eerily silent. The rain came down harder, but the sound of the rain couldn't drown out this strange stillness. We just stood there, motionless, like prey surrounded by hunters. Suddenly one of the group screamed. A figure appeared in the rain, a blurry form, unrecognizable, if you could even call them eyes. Theirs glowed brightly in the darkness, and in just a few seconds they vanished, as though they'd never existed. None of us dared to continue. Everything around us started to blur. Fading like a bad dream. We didn't know we were anymore and didn't know what to do. The feeling of being trapped in an endless space was something none of us could have imagined. I looked around only to see an unsettling silence, and something invisible was getting closer. When we turned around to head back, the trail had completely disappeared. The rain had stopped, but the cold and silence still lingered. No one spoke a word. The sky was dark, like the whole world was sinking into shadow, and I realized the only thing we could do was keep walking. But each step felt like we were entering something deeper, something we could never escape from. In the end, none of us remembered the way back. What we'd gone through, those strange figures, the police officers' gases, it was all part of a cruel game we could never understand. But one thing was certain, we would never forget this journey. My name is Jack, and I've always had a passion for camping trips into the wild. This time my group of close friends decided to visit a new location. Echo Canyon, a place known for its towering cliffs, vast landscape, and eerie echoes from the canyon's walls. It's a remote, desolate area deep within a forest, far from any towns or cities. None of us knew that this trip would forever change everything. We arrived at the canyon in the late afternoon, the sunset casting a dim, orange glow across the darkening sky. The surrounding space felt unnaturally. Group of 7. Me, Alex, Brian, Chaniel, Emma, and Finn set up camp by a small stream, the water trickling softly, almost as if whispering something to us. Everything seemed normal, just another night under the stars. But as night fell, I started feeling something was off. There was an odd stillness in the air than usual. No animal sounds, no rustling of the trees in the wind. Just silence. The entire atmosphere felt suffocating. We sat around the fire, he joking and laughing, but no one dared to speak what was on their mind, as if we all felt the same unsettling hanging in the air. As the night grew deeper, the sky darkened further, and that's when I heard it. A whisper, faint yet distinct, almost as if it was right next to me. Jack. I turned around, but there was no one. I thought I must have imagined it, but then I heard it again, this time coming from a dark corner of the forest. It sounded like someone was calling me, but the voice was strained and distorted, as though it was being choked back. I stood up and walked away from the camp, trying to figure out what was going on. But as I stepped into the darkness, I felt something strange. The air grew unnaturally cold, and I could hear my footsteps clearly, but there was something else. Another set of footsteps following mine. I turned around, but there was nothing but the thick, oppressive blackness. When I returned to the campsite, I found Daniel standing alone, facing the forest. He was frozen, his eyes wide open as if he'd seen something terrible. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. As I approached, saw his eyes, vacant, lifeless. It wasn't the Daniel I knew anymore. "Runk, we can't stay here anymore," he said, his voice hoarse as if he'd been dragged through the dirt. We decided to search for the others, but when we turned back, the camp was completely different. The fire was out, and in the pitch black, we couldn't see a thing. All that remained were strange, shifting shadows, though something was moving around us, watching our every move. Alex, Chloe, and Finn were the next to disappear. They didn't respond when we called their names, and no matter how hard we searched, there was no sign of them. Then, we heard the sound of laughter. Soft, mocking, but it wasn't human. It was distorted, as if something was taunting from the darkness. At that moment I felt it. A presence, something unseen but undeniably there. A suffocating, dread-filled force closing in around us. Suddenly I heard my name being called from afar, but this time it wasn't a normal voice. It was a strained, guttural sound, as if someone was in excruciating pain, calling out from a distant, unreachable place. "Jack, come outside. No one survives if stayed. This is the price we pay." We ran as fast as we could, not know what we were running from, but one thing was certain. We were no longer alone in the forest. Something from a time long past was watching us, and it wasn't going to let anyone leave easily. When the rescue team arrived the next morning, we were found unconscious, unable to explain what happened. All they found were strange footprints leading to a deep, dark crevice, a place we had never ventured into. But the thing I can never forget is the dark shape in that canyon. I don't know what it was, but every time I close my eyes, I still feel its presence, as if something is standing just outside my window waiting. This camping trip wasn't just an adventure. It was a warning reminder that some places should never be visited, and some secrets should never be uncovered, because at Echo Canyon, the darkness never left. If you enjoyed our camping adventures and want to join us for more thrilling outdoor content, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on our latest adventures, tips, and insights in the world of camping and exploration. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we can't wait to share more thrilling outdoor adventures with you in the future!